the side. I don't know how I look from the side.
Well, first of all, can we have a round of applause for Seth, please?
I'm done.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean the louder scream was just. So I'm going to kick off with a quote, and this is the only handout that I've got. This is the only quote that I'll read, but I'll never remember it. So raise your hand if you've heard of a guy called Martin Heidegger. Anybody heard of him? Yeah, so he's very cool, very crazy, became a Nazi, but he said a lot of cool stuff, and this is one of them. So this is from an essay that he did in 1938 called The Age of the World Picture. Right, so he said, everyday opinion sees in the shadow only the lack of light, if not light's complete denial. In truth, however, the shadow is a manifest, though impenetrable testimony to the concealed emitting of light. So what Heidegger meant by that was anything in our world that is in any way unclear is not unclear because it's difficult or because, not because it's difficult. The things are unclear because somebody or some group of people, or perhaps even all of us collectively, are working to make something unclear, because ultimately we can only hold so much in our heads at any one time, and in order to get through the day, maybe even get through a year or the whole of our lives individually or collectively, we have to forget quite a lot. We can't bear everything in mind. So this would be the idea of interpolation, if anybody does that in the social sciences. So I am going to apply this idea to Batman 3, and hopefully the things I say, I'll make sure that you don't necessarily need to have seen the film, but maybe some of you have. I hope you have, because then we can chat about it. So I'll be talking, until Sarah raises her hand, I'll be talking with Bane behind me. And so rather than make this, I'd really like to have like a proper conversation about the kind of things that I'm talking about, and I think we can. So does anybody want to like throw up their hand and tell me what their favourite film is? Because I think like it would be pretty easy enough. All the stuff that I've read for this, I could, as long as I've seen it, I could hopefully throw back to you some idea of what politics and ideology and maybe something a little bit more unclear operating behind a film's message may be there. So I did this in Coventry at the Transport Museum. People raised their hands and shouted stuff like Finding Nemo, and someone did Forrest Gump. So Forrest Gump, you've got the story of a guy who has a difficult life, encounters problems, and then at the end has some kind of absolution. It's a nice ending, ends well. But then so I said something like it on that night. Did you ever realise that Forrest Gump gets where he gets in the end because he never, ever, ever questions what somebody says to him? So the army, he gets into the Peace Corps, he gets into this, he gets into that, because he never, ever says no. So it's possible perhaps to see Forrest Gump as some kind of exercise in conformity. Somebody else talked about Goodfellas. So you've got this naughty little thrill at the end where somebody in a life of crime has been brought low and everybody ends up locked up, but he's still fantasizing about his life of crime. But maybe the way the story is structured, maybe the way the ideas are presented to us is that, criminality, excess, transgression, these things are meant to be just a naughty little thrill, and maybe the film is quite insidious on that basis. Maybe it's quite frightening. So I'd be happy in this 10 minutes if all I've done is to raise the possibility that there is politics behind every piece of art, the way that Heidegger would have foreseen. That there is no such thing as happy accident, that things are structured in such a way to benefit someone, that somebody benefits all the time, and film is a good example of that. That this is an artistic medium. Batman 3 cost a lot of money to produce, and the Hollywood machine spent many hundreds of millions of dollars to portray communism. This is one of the things that I could talk about. Why would it bother to do that? Why would it bother? Why would it bother? My contention possibly would be that it bothered to do that because it would portray communism in a certain way, that it would get us all thinking that communism is, this guy, that communism is violent. You get, I don't know if you've seen it, but you get images of people being ripped out from their houses. You see like property being redistributed. You see a lot of horrible, horrible stuff. But why does it appear horrible? And is that a construction of Hollywood itself? Is Hollywood selling us something? When we buy a ticket to go and see Batman 3 or any other film that we might talk about now, are we buying more than a piece of entertainment? Are we buying inclusion into a system of ideas? Are we buying inclusion into a set of politics that anchors our lives and gives us some kind of security? So let's do that. So if anybody wants to like throw out their hand, I hope I've seen whatever it is that you might shout out. But does anybody want to shout a film out?
Back to the Future.
See, okay, so Back to the Future would be. I'm not so good on the plot with this, but do you want to tell me a bit about the plot? Remind me of the plot, because I have seen it. Remind me of the plot.
Okay,
What
so
happens
you
in the
have
end?
a crazy scientist
Yeah,
that
yeah.
builds a machine, a car that can travel in time.
Yeah.
And he accidentally sends his friend, his young friend, to the past, like 20 years before, and that guy meets his parents and kind of accidentally like prevent them from meeting, so he's kind of erasing his own future. That's it. And he tries to make them meet so that they can be born, and then of course go back to his own time.
Okay, so there's one thing I could say about that. I could bring Heidegger back in as well. So there might be this sense that we all have that science as such, I mean there's meaning a lot to the scientists here, that there might be this sense that we all have that science has its own autonomy, that science just is, that science may be one of those things in life that is not structured by ideas, that it doesn't matter what we think about the table, that it's still made out of materiality. This would be like the Bishop Berkeley thing, you know, I prove matter by kicking it, that science has its own autonomy. So something Heidegger said in a book called Being in Time, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to attempt that little beauty, but he says that, he makes the quite a contentious point that Newton's laws were not true until Newton himself discovered them. So until Newton's ideas were incorporated into a system of belief and faith, that it didn't really matter that the things that Newton observed were physically operating before, after, forever after, into the future, and as far back as we could imagine, that until it's emotionally expressed by humans, that science as such. So maybe Back to the Future, you sort of have to think that like discourses about science are no different, right? That they always benefit somebody. They always benefit somebody, that there is a politics of research priority, there's a politics of this, there's a politics of that. It's very difficult to uncover, but even something like time travel, right? That if funding was ever available for that there would be a system of political priorities in place, that it would address the kind of what Heidegger called functionality, that it would function. If it didn't function, if it was just research for its own sake, or almost that there is no research for its own sake, so yeah, I mean that's the way I'd approach that. That something that addresses something so crazy like time travel is actually very applicable to our lives, because it can remind us of this sort of, even if you look at like the career of Stephen Hawking and stuff, and how he talks about God and spirituality and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the way I'd approach it. Does anybody want to throw out another one? I know Tom, go on, you must have a good one.
Casablanca.
I like that. Okay, so Casablanca. So Casablanca, right? Casablanca is the triumph of a stoic doing one's duty over another kind of, maybe this draws on like ancient Rome, right? So Epicurus, folly of desires, that life is about pleasure, life is about doing what you want to do, that what is life if not sort of following these passions that we have while we're still able to pursue them, right? So Casablanca is the triumphing of stoicism, and this kind of, you know, the kind of stoicism that you might see in like a Jacques-Louis David painting, like the Oath of the Horatii, if anybody knows that, like, you know, this sort of classical ideal of doing one's duty, that they forsake their love affair to save the life of the resistant guy, right? So, but what are these choices? That's not self-evident. That's not a self-evident choice. That these choices that we make are based on faith. And to choose to fight the war, to choose to fight the Second World War, and to choose to forsake one set of priorities for another set of priorities is just a leap of faith. But something like Casablanca would have us believe that it is the natural, right? The natural way, that it's just logical, that fighting Hitler is more important than hanging around with some pretty Norwegian in Paris, right? That's just how life is. Is that really how life is? Or is that the triumphing of one set of artificial priorities over another set? Does anybody want to throw out another one?
And you've had 5 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, that's cool. I might go on a little bit longer with this. I like this. Anybody want to throw out one more? Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So I'll bring this to Batman. So, Batman 3, you get this crazy, bold, muscular guy, Bane, arises from some creepy, like, pit prison in Asia. You know, he talks about rising from the darkness. And he has this vendetta against, it's never quite expressed as such, but he has this vendetta against the West, and he sees decadence, and so he sees Gotham City as like synonymous with decadence, and so he's following the mission of a group called the League of Shadows, who thinks that Gotham City is so bad that there's no point in saving it, there's no point in even trying, so you just have to blow it up. So Bane engineers this thing with a nuclear warhead that he sort of hides in Gotham, puts it in a few trucks so nobody knows which truck it's in, all this stuff. Is that really the only way to look at communism? It's sort of, someone asked Christopher Nolan, are your films political? And Chris Nolan just said, no, they're not political, that's not what art is. Art just reflects reality. We have to, if we want to make a good film, we have to portray a terrorist as real. We have to portray a real terrorist. If we don't bother to portray reality, no one's going to be scared by it. If we just conjure something else up, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to pay their hard-earned money to go and see it. It's not going to affect anybody on any kind of level. But I don't agree with that. I think that is what art is. That it could be. The question has to remain open, to quote Derrida, which some of you might have heard of. The question at least has to remain open that art is about that. That art is some kind of leap of faith into this abyss of nothingness. That we have to create something from nothing, and that we have to entertain the idea that this guy is not what a communist is as such, it's just what Chris Nolan thinks it is. So I looked at how Chris Nolan inherited anxieties about how you govern the city space from films like Metropolis, Fritz Lang, Battle of Algiers, things like Blade Runner, which is cool to look at. So, I mean, what does anybody think? Has anybody got an idea about that? Like, does anybody agree with me, disagree with me? What do you think, Tom? What do you reckon? How convinced are you by that?
No, because it's still a very popular film, and people don't think, oh, I wonder which film best represents Derrida this week. I should go and see it.
No. Okay, so I would come at this through a guy called Jacques Lacan. So Jacques Lacan talks about how meaning is constructed. So when you try and do this stuff, when you try and tear down the politics of art, when you look at the politics of art and sort of, a lot of people enjoy this, right, as you say. A lot of people go and see this. They work probably an awful job that they don't like, and they go on a Friday night to see this with a big bag of popcorn. They enjoy it. So one thing that you always get when you talk about this stuff is enjoyment. That people say, why are you ruining my fun? It's just a movie. Why are you ruining my fun? But according to Lacan, that's precisely the point. That's precisely the point, that these things, these meanings, what Bane represents, how Bane intersects with the idea of what a communist is in the 21st century, that this relies precisely on the idea of fun, that Lacan called it jouissance, which is like this French word for this excessive enjoyment, this pleasure, that we take pleasure in creating something out of nothing. So, what do you reckon now?
Well, this is a very totalising argument, and no matter what I say, you can always reply, no, you haven't grasped it, there's something else I mean, as Thomas Kuhn thinks, it seems like you've got
Yeah, yeah.
names here. You know, it has to be like falsifiable. I'm not sure how anyone can like prove you and Lacan and Derrida and anyone else you care to cite you haven't heard of to be wrong.
No. And so I'm glad you brought that up. So I actually argue against Derrida. So if you believe Derrida, Foucault, Julia Kristeva, people. So I don't know if anybody's heard of the movement deconstructivism, but Derrida and people like him reduced the person to a collection of myths and pastiches of stories that the human person is just, so you're all looking at me, so what am I? I'm not a person as such, that I'm textured by, the text of being a male, I'm textured by the text of being a Warwick student, that I'm just a collection of stories. So that's always slipping, that's always out of control. So I use Hegel, right, dialectics, yeah? So I agree with you that it is non-falsifiable, right? I agree with you that it's absolutely non-falsifiable. But almost that you have to confront this overwhelming truth that's presented to us. So the truth that's presented to us would be, this is a communist, this is a communist, that this is something we should fear, right? But that, I'd almost come back at you and say that is almost non-falsifiable in the context in which we live. That, okay, so interpretations of Batman characters, that if you were a little boy, you have trouble at school, you maybe have girl trouble, maybe your parents argue all the time, and you draw sort of a particular emotional resonance from the heroism of the Batman story, and you grow up to be, sort of an investment banker, right? But that's from the terms of the politics that govern our society, that's more than acceptable. If a guy looks at the Joker and doesn't interpret the Joker as this sort of naughty little thrill like we might see in Goodfellas, but interprets it maybe a little bit more literally, and goes into a cinema and starts shooting people, that's considered not okay. And but so my contention is that it's only from the point of view of the set of ideas that govern the society in which we live that we can judge these things to be right or wrong. That Bain is a communist, right or wrong, not as such, not intrinsically, but because we have to invest things with a set of meanings that make them sort of tangible to us, that they wouldn't be tangible otherwise. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to get some questions. I could leave you with a quote from The Usual Suspects, and it addresses like this idea that things aren't ideological, that it's just a chair, it's just a table, it's just a man, it's just a communist, that no, why think too much? Is this not what gives students a bad name? Shouldn't we be out there solving real problems and not coming up with all this stuff about something that people just enjoy, people just want to enjoy? So the quote from Usual Suspects is, "The biggest trick the devil ever pulled is to convince you he didn't exist." And just like that, he's gone. I'd love to get some questions.
Yeah, just to let you know, you've gone over a bit, but you can take a couple of questions for now. Yeah.
Anybody got a question? Go on, Emmett.
Is this the last Batman movie?
It's the last Batman movie, yeah, did you see it?
To the conclusion that they're portraying communism.
What's that, sorry?
What led you to the conclusion that they're...
Well, I mean, have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah, so Bain and his sort of like militant group, you get this whole extended sequence where they talk about the rich being ripped from their decadent nests, yeah? You get all these bankers dragged out into the street, you get the sort of like, you get this, the guy that played the Scarecrow in the first movie, he's sitting atop this great sort of judicial bench that's like made up of lots of benches, and they've got sort of this Revolutionary War Tribunal. I'm not saying it's, see, this is a conversation, like communism as such is, I mean, I don't know if anybody's looked at Saussure, but communism is not a thing, right? It's something that we invest. So what I consider to be communism, what you consider to be communism, it precisely needn't be the same thing, that we can have very different interpretations of a work of art. So I mean, I could be totally convinced that that's, a portrait of communism, and you might not be. Do you see what I'm saying? That's almost my argument. That it's the artificiality of the argument itself. That you know, somebody else could come up with an interpretation of Batman 3 that is mainly about bananas, umbrellas, or penguins. But the reason that idea doesn't gain wider currency, that doesn't become entrenched in the psyche, is because most people don't believe it, and there's conformity going on there.
But then it entirely depends on who is watching the movie.
Yeah.
So, if the target of this movie is the American market, let's say,
Yeah.
I would agree. But it's a movie which is supposed to be seen all over the world.
Yeah. So this would tie into the. You ever heard of Francis Fukuyama? The guy. So Francis Fukuyama, in sort of 1991, 1992, said that history's over. That with the end of the Soviet Union, that history as such is over, and that liberal democracy, the kind of prism from which BAME would appear threatening, is gone. That's over. So, yeah, is it made available for viewing in lots of different marketplaces? Yes. So, are they trying to convert China? Yes, definitely. Is this a piece of propaganda film?
But this is your argument that they will not view it. They will not have the perception that this is communism.
What's that?
Well, it's your perception as a citizen of the UK.
Yeah.
That this is communism, but if a Chinese person watches the movie, I don't think he will have the same.
Oh no, exactly, and that's almost my argument, is that the artificiality of ideas themselves, right? So almost that's my argument itself, that the question has to remain open at least. That we can't simply say something like Chris Nolan's film is just reflecting reality, right? That communism is threatening, and that we all want a sort of a Batman to ride in and like save us Batman. That we. The only thing I'm trying to say is that is far too simplistic, right? And that, as you rightly say, that someone in China may come along and think, what the hell is that?
I mean, so many protests all over Europe. It's like similar ideas that rich get richer and so on. And then, you know, all over the world there are revolutions which are similar to this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is essentially all I'm saying. That ideas about art are necessarily artificial. That I don't think. So my contention would be that someone in China that got to go and see this film, I'm not sure whether it was made available in China, I don't know that, but or in Eastern Europe, right? That anybody in East, I don't necessarily believe that anybody from Eastern Europe or China would have a privileged view of what communism is. That is my argument. That what communism is an idea that can be saturated with any number of meanings. That's my contention. Has anybody got another question?
I was going to say we'd have to stop it there, basically.
Cool.
Your time's up, I'm afraid. Anyway, thank you very much. And